Welcome to the Graduation Equity Webinar Series. I'm Kefi Andersen, System Improvement Program Supervisor Lead, and today we're talking about hope and healing-centered engagement practices. This meeting is being recorded, and it should be available just about immediately on YouTube at some point today. Closed captions are available in the menu, so if you want to take advantage of that, you can. The PowerPoint is posted on OSPI on our Graduation Equity webinar page. And I just want to double check. This webinar is brought to you through the Office of Student Engagement and Supports within the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. At OSPI, we believe that each student needs to be prepared for post-secondary pathways, careers, and civic engagement. The Graduation Equity webinar was created with the purpose of highlighting practices that increase access to education and ultimately to graduation. Through our webinars, we are striving to go beyond equality, to think about the opportunities that we have to examine and dismantle current policies and practices that result in disparate outcomes for our students, with the ultimate goal of ensuring that each student has access to the instruction and to the support that will make them successful in school and in life. I want to share with you this ancestral lands overlapping map. Fall's my favorite time of year. I love seeing the leaves turn and going to see the salmon run. We ask that the participants in this meeting honor the ancestral lands on which each of you are located today. And we'll paste some links in the chat to help with that. We have a resource sheet that you'll be able to grab with that. In my life, I mostly travel around the intersection of the lands of the Squaxin Highlands, the Coast Salish, the Cowlitz, and the Squally tribes. I would like to acknowledge the Indigenous people who have stewarded this land since time immemorial and who still live here today. Tribal consultation is a great way to get to know your local tribes and begin relationships that benefit students and their families. And if you'd like to know more about it, we'd love to connect you with our Office of Native Education. This month, I want to make sure that we're thinking about hope with an equity lens. Access to engaging courses and promising futures is definitely an equity issue. Our school systems play a huge role in instilling hope in students, and they can show students what's possible. They can set students up for success in the long term. Hope Science provides the tools for staff and students to imagine what's possible and to find pathways forward that will turn a dream into a reality. It goes beyond optimism. It's about taking action to pursue your future. We're hoping that you walk away from our webinar today understanding high leverage foundational supports for Hope Science. You'll have some innovative ideas for how hope can be taught and reinforced in your school and how it extends to healing-centered engagement practices. You'll get to learn from Burton Elementary how they're applying these practices with their staff and students, and you'll get resources to get started. I want to start by pointing out an extension of Hope Science work from Dr. Sean Ginwright. He's written in recent years about healing-centered engagements. I'm a big fan. We have an article that we'd like to share with you that's in our resource sheet that he has written on this topic. Healing-centered engagement is explicitly political rather than clinical. It empowers youth to explore systems of power and to affect them. And it's culturally grounded and views healing as the restoration of identity. So a person isn't reduced to the worst thing that's ever happened to them, but instead, they're using their past experiences as a bridge to who they are today. It's also asset-driven and focuses well-being that we want rather than the symptoms that we want to suppress. So it isn't focused on what's wrong with you. It's building on your strengths and towards wellness. It also encourages support for adult providers with their own healing, which we all know it's really hard to inspire hope if we aren't feeling hopeful ourselves. I highly encourage y'all to read his article. We've been passing it around at OSPI, and it definitely has had my mind turning about the opportunities to apply these principles to our work. I brought with me Shelly Milne. She's our OSPI Director of Elementary Education. And she has brought with her Dr. Chan Hellman. He is a professor at the Anne and Henry Zarrow School of Social Work, and he's the director of the Hope Research Center at the University of Oklahoma. We're super excited to have them both here with us today, and we'll have a panel a little later in our show as well. We like to start off with just seeing who is in the room with us. So we are going to launch this poll to tell us a little bit about your role, what grade band that you work with the most, and how familiar you are with this topic. And just so that you know, the poll, it has questions, so you might have to scroll to see them all and answer. And if you are a panelist, you probably can't take the poll. Sorry about that. I'm just gonna check in with the chat. And Jocelyn's dropped in our Hope resources, so you can get that as well. Oh, and it looks like Chan is in the audience. Welcome, Chan. Great. We've got about 78% have done our poll at this point. We're kind of 80% now. It looks like we have quite a few school counselors, community liaisons, school psychologists in the room, as well as a fair amount of OSPI, ESD, and district office staff. A lot of folks in the audience are in the middle or high school range or in the both. So we've got a wide range of folks there, and people are somewhat familiar with the topic. There's a handful that say it's new. There's a handful that say they're very familiar with the topic. So I think that we can probably go pretty deep today. I'm going to share those results back with you just so that you can see them. Welcome, everybody. We're glad you're here. Let's go to Shelly to talk a little bit about Hope Science at OSPI.
Very excited to be here today, and my purpose is just going to be to establish our why. Why hope? Why now? As a director of elementary education at OSPI, I'm happy to be part of this webinar to explore the topics of hope and healing-centered engagement practices and connecting these topics to our agency priorities. September is the perfect time to discuss the topic of hope and goals as educators and students return to school for the beginning of the 2022-23 school year. And I know with all of the educators in the room, September is always goal setting time that's still my goal setting time. But first, the topic of hope connects with all 4 of OSPI's strategic goals. Programs, divisions, and OSPI staff align our work plans to these 4 strategic goals. All of these goals connect to Hope Science. Ensuring equity, this includes recognizing and celebrating the strengths of every student, family, and community, and it calls for a strength-based approach. Collaboration and service with our students and their families, working together with students and families to appreciate and champion their goals and to equip students with the ability to envision the pathways for achieving their goals. Achieving excellence through continuous improvement includes examining, adjusting, and changing systems to remove barriers that keep us from hope and student goal attainment. We move to hope and equity. Oh, can you go back one, Kefi? Sorry. A strong commitment to equity guides our work at OSPI. A strong connection exists between hope and equity. Our vision is that all students can set goals, develop pathways to reach those goals, and know that they possess the ability to be in control of making those goals a reality. Sorry, lost my notes. The Washington Social Emotional Learning, or SEL standards and benchmarks were adopted in January of 2020. Environmental and instructional conditions for learning include providing students with nurturing settings, curriculum and content, and opportunities to practice goal setting and adapting strategies to meet our goals and overcoming barriers, and then evaluating outcomes and processes. Outcomes for students, and that's what we're here, and that's what all of us are here in the room, and that's what we want to think about. And as we increase levels of hope in our students, we're also helping them reach their desired futures, cultivate their own gifts, talents, and interests, find pathways and remove barriers, thus increasing student opportunity for success through increased hope. So not only increasing hope for them, but also the implications for the hope that's released into the world. So just really happy to be here today and be part of this conversation.
Thanks, Shelly. I wanted to share some of the results that we have available also in the Health Youth Survey. We have collaborated with Dr. Hellman on these questions, and we just think it's so valuable that they're out there and that you can see them locally. So this is just a snapshot of this point in time of some of our student groups. And when I see these numbers, I'm thinking about opportunities for our system to respond and just to plan proactively. So, and I also just want to draw your attention to the survey itself. It has just a wealth of information, and I want to encourage you to look at those results for your community and think about the variety of different student attitudes and just knowledge about mental and physical well-being. I also wanted to point out that our high school and beyond plans can be a really powerful tool for hope as well. They prompt students to answer the questions, who am I? Who do I want to become? And how do I get there? Related to what Shelly shared earlier, these are aligned with setting goals, willpower, waOSPI. And while high school and beyond plans can sometimes be looked at as like box checking activities, when you present them in a really meaningful way, they can be powerful vehicles to motivate students in their own best interests. So I hope folks are tapping into those as well. We are going to go to Dr. Hellman. Dr. Shan Hellman is a professor of social work at the University of Oklahoma and director of the Hope Research Center. He's written more than 150 scientific publications and has presented at numerous national and international conferences worldwide. Chan's TEDx presentation on hope in 2021 has over 100,000 views. Chan's research is focused on hope as a psychological strength, helping children and adults overcome trauma and adversity. This research is informed and informed the development of the Hope Centered and Trauma-Informed Training Program. Chan's the co-author of the award-winning book, Hope Rising, How the Science of Hope Can Change Your Life, with his co-author, Casey Gwynn. As a result of this work, Chan was one of 5 invited workshops for Jane Goodall's Activating Hope Summit held in 2021. So welcome, Dr. Hellman. I need to give you control.
Yeah,
you should have it now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Kefi. Thank you all very much. I was actually very excited when I jumped on to see the reference to Sean Jenright's work. I'm a big fan of the work that he's doing in communities. We use the same framework of hope. So anyway, that was a nice way for me to join in. So thank you for that. I was also pleased when on the poll question, how familiar are you with this concept of hope? And it just really kind of highlights sort of my affinity with the great state of Washington. As some of you have heard me say, my long-term aspirational goal is to actually move to your great state. I still have a little bit of work to talk my family into that, but I will get there. Have obviously been doing a lot of collaboration with many organizations, OSPI obviously. I know Allison Rodders here from Kitsap Strong, and we're doing some great collaboration with school districts currently. And then about a month or so ago, trained a large number of your judicial courts, including most of the judges from the Supreme Court on down. So the state of Washington obviously is, in my opinion, a leader in this hope-centered work, and OSPI in particular around education. So thank you all for the invitation to visit with you and to talk real briefly about hope. It is a little bit of an introduction. I am excited because the awareness of hope is increasing in Washington, which makes us ready then to take the next level step in moving deeper into creating hope-centered processes. So anyway, just a real quick thank you and introduction to that. As a bit of a heads up, I'm going to ask you to engage in the chat function in some places in this presentation, and then I'll make sure to leave some time at the end if there's some Q&A. Before I forget, I wrote myself a little note, and when I saw hope and its alignment with social emotional learning, there's actually a very recent publication, not by our team, but the publication demonstrates that the capacity for a youth's ability for hope actually is a significant leading predictor of social emotional learning, which is the direct lead or drive to classroom engagement. So hope is clearly the mindset that youth need to engage, not only in academic achievement, but what I consider to be as important, their own well-being. The other thing is that in the state of Oklahoma, I've collaborated with our state Department of Education in connecting hope with our individual career and academic planning, the sort of post-secondary, and it aligns so well with the concept of hope. And we saw two outcomes as part of that evaluation, that when youth set the goal of academic or career planning, courses became viewed as benchmarks or pathways, and we saw stronger engagement educationally, but vastly improved teacher-student relationships. So just a couple things I wanted to highlight there. I'm going to go ahead and begin to move forward. And what I will tell you is that for us, hope is not the outcome. Well-being is always the outcome in all of the work that we do. And so creating hope-centered frameworks or hope-centered strategy is because of the 2000 published research studies that demonstrates that hope is one of the strongest predictors of our capacity to thrive. And so it's really a shift away from this idea of programs, policies, and practice that are really focused on identifying the adversity, identifying the issues, and reducing those issues. And so hope really comes from this framework of a strengths-based perspective that is really grounded in the question of what is right with you. So how do we nurture those strengths to promote student well-being and achievement? So as Kefi mentioned, this did lead, all of this research has led to this curriculum that we've developed. It is a 4-phased curriculum. Phase 1, which is really sort of a keynote type or introduction like we're doing here, is really our phase 1. But this is informed by 15 years of our work. So what is hope? And here I'll ask you to engage in the chat room. And so what I would ask you to do is just when you think of this word hope, what comes to mind? What are some things that you associate with hope? And just, if you don't mind, just type that into the chat function briefly. A wish, very good. Boy, they're scrolling through so fast. I can't tell you how happy that makes me to see you all so engaged in this, especially in a Zoom webinar format. So thank you for those. I see optimism a lot, looking forward. I see faith a lot. Very good. So as you're typing that, let me ask one more question. Is hope an emotion? Is hope a feeling that we have? Or is hope a way of thinking? Is it a cognitive process? So, good. So I see both. I see a feeling, way of thinking. Very good. So what I will tell you is that for us, for the work that we're doing, hope is a mindset. Hope is a cognitive process. And the reason this is so important for us to understand is that if hope was a feeling, at best, we'd be able to help students and staff manage those emotions. But because hope is a mindset, we know it is something that can be taught. So here is our definition. Hope is the belief that the future will be better than today and that we have the power to make it so. So really the important aspects of this definition is that if we stop with hope is the belief that the future will be better than today, if we stopped there, that would just be optimism. But because hope includes the latter part of this definition, that we have the power to make it so, hope is about taking action to pursue that future. And that's really the distinction between hope and optimism. So hope is made up of these 3 core components: goals, pathways, and willpower. So goals become the cornerstone of everything that we do around hope. Each and every one of us, from the moment we wake up until the moment we go to bed, we are pursuing goals in our life. The question is whether or not we have the pathways, the ability to identify the strategies to pursue those goals, or that pathways are available to us. So pathways thinking is really the strategizing piece. And then finally, willpower is our ability to focus the mental energy we have on those pathway pursuits. Now, what's really important for us to understand is that in order for us to be hopeful, we have to have both pathways and willpower. Both are required. So for instance, it might be that I am highly motivated towards a goal, but if I don't have the pathways or the strategies to pursue those goals, we would actually classify that as lower hope. And then alternatively, it might be that we have the pathways available to us. We just don't have the motivation or the mental energy to take on one more thing. So in this way, this would also be lower, represent the lower levels of hope. So what I'd like for you to do is to just think about how we use the word hope in our everyday conversations. So for instance, what are some common phrases that you've used in hope, just in conversation with each other? Probably use them today, but just what are some common phrases where we use the word hope in conversation with each other? Yeah, very good. I hope it doesn't rain. Great. So I will confess that I just returned from Northern Ireland for 2 weeks. And of course I was, I hope my plane is on time. I hope my flights aren't canceled. So let me think about that for just a moment in the context of hope. That is that I hope that my flights are not delayed. So my goal is that I want to arrive on time, and I have a lot of willpower towards that. The problem is that I can't control air traffic or the weather or maintenance. And so what I want us to understand is that while I have the willpower, I do not have the pathways. And so I need for us to understand the distinction between hoping and wishing. So hoping is when we have both that willpower and that pathways. Wishing is when we only have the desire for the goal. And in fact, what we know is that wishing is passive towards the goal. Hope is about taking action to pursue the goal. So it's really important for us to understand the distinction between hoping and wishing. And more importantly, I think it's important for us to understand that when we talk to others about the science of hope or the hope initiatives that are taking place in Washington, is that for individuals who have never heard of this framework, they hear the word hope and interpret it as wishing. So we need to be very intentional in communicating that hope is about pursuing that future, that hope is about having goals, pathways, and willpower. Christina, I love that. Hope is a verb. That is absolutely right. Hope is actionable. So some of the things that we've found in our research working with both youth and teachers, counselors, staff, principals, and others, is that we know that, for instance, youth, when we are able to nurture hope, we see an improvement in grades. We see improvements in attendance and graduation rates. There's a couple of studies that exist that measure the hope level of a school. And in those places with higher hope, they see a significant reduction in chronic absenteeism, referrals, truancy, dropouts, etc. And as some of you have heard me say before, there's a multitude of studies now that demonstrate that a student's capacity for hope is a better predictor of first-year college performance than the ACT, SAT, or high school GPA, while controlling for social economic status. I'm going to talk a little bit more about things that we've been studying around burnout, turnover, and well-being among teachers and counselors in creating hope-centered school districts. So one thing that we've been paying attention to is that hope is the belief that the future will be better and that I have the power to make it so. However, what we know is that trauma and adversity can rob us of those things, rob us of the belief the future can be any different, or it can rob us of the perception that we're empowered to pursue that future. So one of the things that we find very consistently is that when we are in the presence of adversity and stress, and this is for children and adults, we are much more likely to set goals that are avoidant in nature. That is, we're much more likely to set goals of outcomes that we do not want to occur. But when we're able to nurture and restore that hope, we see a transition from avoidance to achievement. And this is a really, really important distinction. The other thing we see is that during times of adversity, a focus on short-term goal setting is much more successful than long-term goal setting. We also need to understand that many children throughout the adversities of their life really struggle with the pathways thinking. It is not something that they've been exposed to or learned very much. So helping children develop problem-solving skills and self-regulation skills is a part of nurturing hope. And then finally, I just love this piece. Research out of Florida State University demonstrates two things about our willpower. First and foremost, it is a limited resource. You and I only have so much mental energy to give day in and day out. And the second thing this research demonstrates is that our willpower, this mental energy, is actually strongly associated with the glucose in our system. And what this shows us is that nutrition becomes a very important component to nurturing hope. So we, think about things like free and reduced lunch programs, after school programs, community eligibility programs are all pathways of hope because of this nutrition component. So let me ask you to use the chat function again. And I ask this at every presentation. If you've heard me speak, you've heard me ask this question, but just use the chat function. And so you're there, absolutely wonderful. Despair is the most common response that I get. As I mentioned, I was just in Northern Ireland, in Belfast and Londonderry, same response. I've been in the Middle East, in Israel, same response. That despair is what we typically think of as the opposite of hope. However, what we know is that the loss of hope is actually a process, and that apathy becomes the opposite of hope. Many of you, correctly identified that. So what happens is that when our goals begin to experience a block, we have an emotional reaction like anger, frustration, and anxiety, which can transition to despair. And the reason that despair is such an important part of hope still is because I still have a lot of willpower towards the goal. It's just that my pathways are significantly blocked. And then ultimately, that despair can transition into apathy. Now, I've been paying a lot of attention to your Healthy Youth Survey, the latest data. So these results come from, many of you have probably seen this in your own analysis. But if I look at a student's report to the question about the grades, and in particular, pay attention to the grades they earned last year, where they identify they received mostly C's, D's, and F's, we can see the connection between a student's hope and academic achievement. This is very consistent with the published literature. And here, what you see is that youth who report or score low hope, over half of them report receiving C's, D's, and F's. And you can see, obviously, the higher levels of hope, the significant reduction in those grades. I do want to highlight the important distinction between even low hope and slight hope. So for instance, at low hope, 53% report C's, D's, and F, but just moving the needle in a child's hope reduces those grades, those C's, D's, and F's by over 10%, which is phenomenal improvement. So it's just another indicator that when we do hope work, we don't have to go from low to high. We just have to begin the journey of nurturing that hope, and good outcomes follow. This is very consistent with the 2018 Healthy Youth Survey. We just got notification of publication of this data for the connection between hope and suicidal ideation. And so again, you can see the connection that higher hope youth do better. The good news, and this was mentioned earlier, is that hope can be taught. The good news is we know how to nurture that hope. And we've created a curriculum for that, obviously collaborating with a lot of your organizations, many of you on this webinar, or affiliates of yours are going through these programs. So we know how to do and nurture this concept of hope. Real quickly, this is a study that I've been leading for almost 10 years now, where we've been studying youth who've been exposed to domestic violence. This is roughly 3,000 youth from 26 states. And so you can see a high rate of exposure to the adverse childhood experience. And the intervention itself is not therapeutic. It is literally creating a hope curriculum where youth learn on a daily basis how to set goals and how to generate those pathways. This is oftentimes in collaboration with YMCA summer camps, so it is not a therapeutic based intervention. We measure hope 30 days before the intervention, before the camp, the last day of camp, and a 30-day follow-up. And these results have been very consistent for the past 6 years at least, where we see significant gains in hope. Now, what I want to remind you is that hope is not the outcome for us. Hope is the process. Hope is the framework that we use. And in this particular data, what we have found in tracking youth for over a year is that this 2-point, actually almost 3-point increase in hope between a pre-test and post-test actually predicted a letter grade change in the classroom. And for us, that's the outcome of hope. Hope, again, is that framework. So we know how to do the work. We know how to nurture hope. It is centered around introducing the language of hope and then really leaning into goals, pathways, and willpower. I'm going to be coming close to the end of my presentation and kind of wanted to leave some time for Q&A. But I wanted to share with you some data that we've been collecting as it relates to integrating hope into not just youth, but also into staff, teachers, and school counselors. And so in this data, what we find is that hope is actually a significant protective factor for the workforce. So here you can see that the lower hope teachers and counselors have an average score on a burnout indicator quite high of 59. What I want to point out again is this really important stair-step difference at each level of hope. And what you see is that going from low hope to slight hope, just moving the needle, produced a dramatic reduction in burnout and a dramatic reduction at each level. So again, it reminds us that when we begin to implement hope-centered strategies, that it's the journey that's important. You don't have to go and focus on going from low hope to high hope. We see similar results with regards to retention. In Oklahoma, I've been working with our largest state agency, the Oklahoma Department of Human Service, creating a hope-centered framework where all 6,000 employees have been trained. We saw a significant increase during COVID, a significant increase in hope, and a 33% reduction in turnover, saving countless millions of dollars in recruitment, training, etc. So we know that hope is a significant protective factor for youth. We know it's a significant protective factor for staff. The hope-centered curriculum and focus is to build a hope-centered school. For instance, where we begin to look at what would a hope-centered parent-teacher conference look like? How do we help inform and equip and empower teachers, counselors, and administrators to create a school environment where students thrive as well as teachers and staff thrive. So I'll go ahead and see if there are any questions and be happy to respond to those.
Jocelyn, I'm not seeing any in the Q&A exactly. But if people do have questions for Dr. Hellman, this would be a great time to add them to the Q&A feature. Is there a specific link that people can use to look at the Hope-Centered and Trauma-Informed curriculum, or is that proprietary?
Yeah, so you can actually, if you just Google Hope-Centered organization, maybe look at Hope-Centered organization and the Department of Human Services. My website is currently under revision. I hope to have it up in the next couple of weeks, but the state of Mississippi, their judicial courts also have a really nice website resource for that. Your state of Washington, the administration of courts also has that nice resource available. So you could keep Google in mind, but I'm sort of not sure I'm real high hope on my website just yet. A lot of it's out of my control.
That's okay. It looks like Jeff put a link into the chat for people so they can use that.
Thank you, Jeff. How are you?
And there's another question. Char asked, what data tools did you use to measure hope? And is that something that educators can also use?
Absolutely. So there's an adult hope scale and there's a children's hope scale, and you can literally Google these. They're free for use. They were developed by Professor Rick Snyder, who is the originator of hope theory. But these scales are available to the public and in what we call fair use. They don't cost anything. These scales are validated for children ages 7 to 17, and they're really powerful predictors of a lot of positive outcomes, including self-regulation, curiosity, gratitude. My work has been focused predominantly in areas of pretty high trauma and adversity. And we see dramatic improvements in emotional regulation, for instance. So just really good outcomes with this data. It takes about 10 minutes to administer and score. You can do that individually. It's a real simple and pretty self-explanatory assessment.
Yeah, I love those tools for that.
You know, Allison actually just highlighted, they actually, thank you, Allison, but Kitsap Strong created an amazing like 5-page toolkit that can give you the scale, but also a whole host of resources around scoring and interpreting it. So thank you, Allison, for reminding me of that.
Do you have any standard information that you share with families specifically?
Because I work with organizations themselves, I work with organizations to create those documents to share with families. So most of the work I've been doing in that space is when children have been removed. So creating hope toolkits for children, families, foster parents, etc. I know that there are some documents that have been created, and I've trained parents like at parent-teacher conferences, and I've published a couple of popular magazine articles. So I think if you Googled me and parenting, for instance, you might find those, and we give some tips along with that.
Yes. Have you done any work regarding levels of hope and our students who are experiencing homelessness? And did you find any themes around that?
Yeah. So thank you for that question. Homelessness is a very important part of the work that I do as a former homeless youth. We've published several studies in regards to homelessness. And what we find is that in creating hope-centered strategies, there's a couple of really important things to keep in mind. First and foremost is that hope is a social gift. And what I mean by that is that hope is nurtured in relationships. And so really, the first process of working, not just with homeless youth, but any youth, is ensuring safety, it's ensuring connectedness, because, having a future expectation or talking about your future goals can be vulnerable. And so there needs to be a good space there. One school that I'm working with here in Oklahoma, they actually every quarter go through the list of every child in the school and ensure that at least one teacher or staff member can identify a relationship. And for children that they identify that nobody really has a relationship, they've developed a process where there's a very intentional connection between 2 to 3 members of the staff and the children who nobody seems to know. So it's a really intentional hope is a social gift strategy.
We did get another question. Amanda was talking with Jeff earlier today about hope and how it doesn't seem to be something that can be mastered necessarily. Would you agree with that? Or how do you convince students and staff that it's something that just needs to be continually practiced and that it's okay to struggle sometimes?
Oh gosh, yes. So thank you for clarifying that for me. I do think that our ability to focus in on goals, pathways, and willpower is something we can master. However, I also want to highlight that hope is not the power of positive thinking. And hope is not something that is always elevated. All of us experience tremendous stress and adversity, and we'll see our hope deplete. The important part is to have that toolkit, that skill set, and that support group, for instance, to nurture and restore that hope. But a clear recognition that hope is something that kind of ebb and flows in our lives.
Absolutely. Do you have any advice around assessments and instruction for like P3 kids?
Yeah, so early childhood is something that we're really working towards. I have been working with an organization to develop a behavioral observation measure of hope for infants and toddlers, really working in that early childhood space, 3-year-old to 2nd grade, roughly, and working with a couple of school districts to do that. And what they're able to demonstrate is that a 3-year-old, for instance, can tell you the difference between hoping and wishing with a very short intentional curriculum. Obviously, the children's hope scale is not something a 3-year-old's going to be able to fill out. So that's an area of research that we're working on right now and validating.
Mm-hmm. We do have another question here, and this is probably going to be our last one because we got to move on to other things, but maybe can you share more on hope as it relates to affirming language, maybe supporting LGBTQ plus youth?
Yeah. So, and I noticed that at the very beginning of your presentation that the transgender youth were the ones with the highest rates of low hope. And by the way, that's what we found in our analysis with your Healthy Youth Survey as well. And we're working, in fact, one of our students just published a piece with the LGBTQ youth in which the connection between depression and suicide attempts, not ideation, but attempts, for this group of youth was especially pronounced. But when we saw that hope was elevated just so slightly, we actually saw it go down to 0 attempts. So when I say that hope is a protective factor for youth, it is especially true for transgendered and LGBTQ youth in our research anyway. And so, you know, building connections, building safety, building sort of hope-centered strategies that have a very specific recognition and honoring of those children is especially important.
Love that. Thank you, Dr. Hellman. And I would love to give you a round of applause from our audience.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you all. Yeah, I love working with Washington. So thank you all for just allowing me to jump in occasionally and be part of your world. So great friends, great state. Look forward to seeing you all in person soon.
Thanks, Dr. Hellman. Next up, we're going to go to our panel. So our panel includes Allison Roddick. She is the Director of Education Innovation at Kids Up Strong. We also have Becky Chase. She's the principal at Burton Elementary. We have Raina Letchin-Wall. She is a school counselor at Burton, as well as Kyle Helm, an instructional coach, and Stephanie Tran, a language specialist. And welcome to all of you. We are so glad to talk to you a little bit about Kids Up Strong and Burton and the hope work that y'all have done. And I think we are gonna stop sharing so that we can see everybody here. Sorry about that. And actually, we're going to start with Allison. So, Allison, do you want to talk a little bit about how Hope Science got started at Kids Up Strong and the work that you've done?
Yeah, thanks, Kefi, and great to see everyone. Always a pleasure to hear from Chan. What a treat. As much as we've worked with him, I always love to hear what he has to say. You know, I want to give a little bit of context before I launch into answering your specific question about what Kids Up Strong is. We're a community initiative working to improve the well-being, important key there in the connection with hope, and educational attainment of all children, families, and adults in Kitsap County. And we do this through a focus on empowerment and equity, the prevention of adverse childhood experiences or ACEs, and the building of resilience. And we do that by utilizing a collective impact approach where community organizations from a broad range of sectors mobilize around a common agenda, a shared vision, and coordinated action toward that shared vision. The movement, if you will, has been in place since about 2016, and most of our early years were really spent mobilizing the community, sharing the science, and creating the infrastructure for the movement. And over time, we've been thankful through that infrastructure that we've seen a dramatic increase in what we call mutually reinforcing activities. And that's where we see interventions, programs, strategies, and collective partnerships, collaborative partnerships. We call them uncommon partnerships, in fact, where we see unique and innovative collaboration between organizations and sectors who otherwise would never be in the same room together, let alone working on projects together. So one of our flagship strategies is our Collaborative Learning Academy. And this is where organizations and schools, including early learning and higher education, participate in a year-long learning journey to increase their knowledge and understanding of trauma, resilience, and hope. This strategy is unique in that it's built on our belief that if we change how organizations and people think, then we can change how organizations and people feel, which are ultimately necessary conditions to change how organizations and people act. So today, we've had over 65 school and organizational teams participate in that Collaborative Learning Academy, or CLA, as we refer to that. So back to your original question and that context of why that's important to understand our work a little bit more. We ran into Chan at a conference in Seattle. I believe it was back in 2016. It might have even been called a Science of Hope conference, and it escapes me who actually hosted the conference at the time. Nonetheless, we talked to him after a breakout session. We were captivated by the science of hope and his session, and really saw the connections to our work through Kitsap Strong. And so we might have even asked him for his slides. We have no shame in borrowing brilliance. And that was our initial relationship and connection to Chan. And since then, we eventually convinced him to present in our Collaborative Learning Academy. That was the formal sort of introduction to that within our framework. And that was probably in about 2017. And then he was a keynote in our annual Resilience Summit in 2018. And so since then, we've really had the opportunity to work very deeply with him on many projects, and leading us to the current amazing project that we're doing actually statewide in partnership with OSPI and Chan. And it's somewhat like our Collaborative Learning Academy model, but it integrates an implementation component during the year as teams design and implement their HOPE projects. The first cohort in this project kicked off January of 2022, so just this year, with 10 teams from across the state engaging in a 2-day HOPE Navigator training, and then several months in a community of practice in order to design their HOPE projects. Second cohort is getting ready to kick off later this month with another 10 teams embarking on the same journey. And we are so thrilled to be able to walk along not only Chan, but the school teams as they engage in learning, planning, doing, and evaluating this year. And I'm gonna, I think, hand it off now to one of those brilliant teams, our friends at Burton Elementary, to share about their journey.
Thank you, Allison. Yeah, we're gonna go to Becky. So Becky, can you tell us a little bit about Burton and what that evolution of HOPE work looks like for your school?
Yes, and thank you for having us. Burton Elementary is in the Evergreen Public Schools down in Southwest Washington, and we are one of the HOPE Navigator teams working with Kitsap Strong. But our work actually started before we joined the HOPE Navigators. Each year, our school has a theme that we center our work for the year around. And during the spring of 2021, when we were still in a hybrid environment and things were pretty hard for our staff, our students, and our families, we wanted to choose a theme that focused on well-being. And our school counselor, Raina, had gone to an OSPI conference for school, or a webinar for school counselors, and learned about the science of hope. And she came back to me and said, "Did you know hope can be measured?" And she had learned that hope can be measured and had been measured in 6th through 12th graders. And she said, "We could do this in elementary school. I think this is the theme that we need to center our work around for the upcoming year." So for the 2021 school year, we chose Igniting Hope as our theme. We're Burton Dragons, so igniting just sounded very natural for us. And we focused one of our school improvement plans around hope, because hope is the #1 predictor of well-being. And as our students and staff were starting to return to school full-time, that was just a natural focus for us in our school improvement plan. Since hope can be measured, like Chan said, and we use the hope scale that Chan referenced, we collected hope scores for all of our 3rd through 5th grade students. We used the hope scores on both an individual level to target students in small groups that had low hope. And also we focused our classroom guidance lessons on aspects of hope, like goal setting and focusing on student strengths. When we kicked off the theme with the staff in the fall of 2021, we shared that our leadership team had read the book Hope Rising, Chan's book, and we shared the science of hope with them. And one of the teachers who was particularly inspired by the work asked if we could have a school-wide book study on Hope Rising. And she co-led the book study with Raina, and nearly half of our staff voluntarily participated. They were all very eager to improve their well-being and the well-being of their students. When we saw the opportunity for the Hope Navigator grant, it was the perfect opportunity to grow our hope work and build a hope-centered school. First, our Hope Navigator team was trained by Chan, Hellman, and Angela Ferris. And we knew we wanted to get our staff training as well from the researchers themselves. So we used some of our grant funds to train the whole staff, both certified and classified. If you want to build a hope-centered school, you have to make sure that all the staff in your organization is aware of the science of hope and has an understanding of the work. And we knew you can't teach hope or lend hope if you don't have hope yourself. So the grant gave us some focused time and funds to deepen our hope work. After building an understanding of the science of hope with our staff, we wanted to create a hope card. This was an idea that Chan had shared with us that was used in the courts in Oklahoma, where the judges would have a card that they kept at their bench to remind themselves of the important concepts about hope. And so we wanted to make one with our staff that we would use. Yeah, this is what ours looks like. So that this is a teacher resource, not something that we post for our students, but just a reminder to our staff of what we've learned and what we want to keep in mind as we're working with students. It's just a summary of the important concepts and a reminder in our daily practice of how we're building a hope-centered school. Additionally, we ordered t-shirts for our entire student body and staff. And these t-shirts share our hope message of this year. And this year, our hope message is our flame inspires others, because as Chan said, hope is a social gift. And we want again, we're dragons, so we have a flame. We want our flame to be shared with others. So each Friday, our staff and students will together wear their t-shirts for our Hope-Filled Fridays. As new students arrive at our school, we can share our message of hope with them, and they'll be given a t-shirt as well. So this year we launched into year 2 of building a hope-centered school. We wanted to launch this year in a different way than our usual launches to a school year. We wanted to find an outdoor space to allow staff to have a soft entry into the school year with some time to focus on the principles of hope. So staff had time for goal setting, a reflective walk, time to focus on gratitude and the important principles that we knew about hope. We also asked our staff to think about what a hope-centered school looks like and think about their role in creating a hope-centered school. So Burton has a very exciting year ahead. We are building a new school building that will be ready in January 2023. So we'll be moving into a brand new space. And as we move into this new space, we wanted to create this hope-filled school. And so as our students walk into their new school, they'll see these words written on the wall. We are the Burton Dragons. We are a community of hope. Our flame inspires others. We each belong. Every day we persevere. We pause to show gratitude. Curiosity and learning guides our path. We can reach our goals and dreams every day. We believe that our futures are bright and we have the power to make it so. So that's our journey in a nutshell from around the hope work.
I love it. I love the visual reminder of it as well. Raina, can you tell us a little bit about what your role as the school counselor is with small groups?
Hi, yes, good morning, everybody. And hello to all my fellow school counselors out there that took the time today to tune in. This is how I first learned about the science of hope. And so I'm really glad that you're with us. So as Becky mentioned at the start of last year, and while we were launching our theme of igniting hope, and before we even ventured into the grant or joined with Chan or Kids Up Strong, my co-counselor Sarah and I shared about the science of hope and about the book Hope Rising in our back to school PD. And I shared a personal story of mine about a former student and a teacher whom I had lent hope to. And in that story, that work had occurred before I knew about the science of hope, but that student story was intertwined with my why as an educator and as a school counselor. And it was my inspiration for why I felt like this work was so important for us and it was the right thing for us to choose to do. So I talked about how hope begets hope. And we started by just asking staff to be a hope buddy to another staff person throughout the building, kind of incognito, just between them throughout the year. After that PD, as Becky mentioned, there was a lot of excitement around doing the book study. And so I helped co-author that book study with another teacher. And we grappled with things like our beliefs and our doubts about the science of hope, because those are important things as well as you're thinking through it. And we had some pretty rich discussions about what hope is and how to teach and build hope through pathways. And with our students, we discussed the sort of obstacles that our students face. And like Becky said, we're down here in the bottom of the state of Washington in Evergreen. Our school is a Title I school, and we have a lot of multilingual students and students with special education needs or counseling needs. And we have a lot of poverty in our school. And so we noticed there were many things that we were already teaching that build a foundation of hope with our students. Things like self-regulation and mindfulness and character development. And we realized how hope fits with what we already knew about things like ACEs and trauma-informed practices and culturally responsive teaching and the brain, and even our work with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we considered what hope looks like in a leader and what a hope-centered school community and workplace would be like. So that's the work that we did with our staff just in the book study. And then there were also things that we did as school counselors with our students. So starting at the beginning of the year, we asked the Hope Scale questions to all of our 2nd through 5th grade students in our minute meetings. If you're a school counselor, you may already be conducting some minute meetings with your students. And so we created some visuals that we thought would help our younger students kind of understand how to answer those questions, and worked with them one-on-one. And then we used that data, as Becky said, in our school improvement plan with the goal to increase our students' hope throughout the year. We taught in our SEL lessons at the Tier 1 level in all of our classrooms about what the definition of hope is, how to know hope from a wish, how to build and set goals, and how to anticipate and overcome obstacles. And we worked on building their agency or waOSPI and their motivation or willpower. We also taught some additional Tier 1 lessons a few months later throughout the year to just keep it going strong. And we focused on student strengths and building on strengths when those obstacles come up. So we took the data from the school improvement plan minute meetings, and we also noticed which students were lowest in hope. And we created a Tier 2 intervention where we put those students into small group counseling groups. And we worked on the hope message again in those groups. We believed that our students had the power to make their future bright, and we were inspired to help ignite our students in the same way, that same vision.
I love how you use the data to inform the small groups. It's such a strategic way to look at inspiring hope to a specific group of students and just really narrowing focus. I admire that just so much. Kyle, we're going to go to you next. You're a leadership coach. What did you notice about the staff response to the hope work?
So the staff response to the hope work really evolved over time. So I think it's helpful to set the stage for what was going on before we started the work and after the work. And really, it's the past 5 years have been extreme in a lot of ways. In 2018, we had a strike that lasted more than 2 weeks. And then in the 1920 school year, the pandemic began. And throughout this time, we've had major changes in district leadership that included 3 superintendents. So over all this time, we've changed the way we taught over and over and over. We've lived with fear of infection, and we've faced challenges to learning social development and emotional health that we've never faced before. So, Dr. Chan spoke to increased adversity and stress and its relationship to hope earlier. Well, an already challenging job felt a lot more daunting, and success felt pretty marginal. So by the spring of the 21-22 school year, morale felt at an all-time low, and we thought it was a good time to lend hope. So in the spring, after or toward the end of the Hope Rising book study, we thought we'd try sharing more of the science of hope with the whole staff again. We did it in August, but we thought to go deeper to see if we could help with that feeling of morale and that feeling of low success. And it didn't go over very well. For some people, it was inspiring. And for another group of people, it really wasn't. And that was when, we realized that there were people living in anger and in despair. Nobody was quite hopeless yet, but you could tell that people were thinking, this is bad and it doesn't feel like it's going to get better. We also had a few people tell us that they felt we were asking them to just be hopeful or just be positive, and that we were contributing to a culture of toxic positivity. So that's when we decided to call in the experts. And we arranged that series of workshops Becky mentioned with Dr. Chan and Dr. Angela, his associate, who we affectionately refer to as a unit. We call them Changela. And they did a whole staff series with both classified and certificated staff. And the general response to that was improved. But it really left folks with the question of, how does it apply to our school community? So that's when at the end of the school year and over the summer, we thought to plan the Hope-centered launch Becky mentioned earlier, really with the aim of starting off the school year feeling connected, empowered, and cared for. And we hoped that staff could start naming what a Hope-centered school looks like and what our roles in are creating that. So we used some grant funds to reserve a site called Columbia Springs. It's an environmental education center and a trout hatchery on the Columbia River here in Vancouver, Washington, so that we could meet outdoors and in nature. We planned activities to connect staff together to continue learning about the science of hope, especially the 6 guiding principles of hope-centered work, and to envision what it really looks and feels like to infuse hope into our practices. So the response to that was overwhelmingly positive. And I would just like to share a couple quotes with you from staff. One person said that this retreat was an amazing way to start the school year with a tone of community, caring, and hope. Another person shared that it felt good to slow down and focus on my goals, which I don't normally get time to do. And then another person said that the relaxed atmosphere relieved some stress about what's ahead. The comments and handouts were encouraging and helped me focus on hope and goals for students. We also noticed that there was a very clear vision for hope-centered work at our school. And the major themes of a hope-centered school that came from this retreat with staff were that the school's oriented toward goals, dreams, aspirations, and the pathways and motivation to reach them. That we feel and students feel connected through supportive, caring, and celebratory interactions, and that staff and students believe in the power and capabilities of others. So the evolution from anger and despair to really recognizing the value in the science of hope and beginning to put it into practice has been meaningful and powerful for both staff and students. And I was thinking about the question that was asked, do we tell people that you master hope, or do we tell them that it changes with time and that you continuously work on it? And I just wanted to share our reminder of our why with all of you, because it speaks directly to that. So on our hope card, it says that hope rises and falls, but we believe when we're part of a community of hope, we're able to envision a bright future for ourselves, set goals, wield agency in achieving them, and see education as a pathway toward well-being.
I love that. And I like that your staff has gotten to grapple with kind of that tension between hope and, toxic positivity, and how do you balance that question? I mean, especially with the pandemic, I know a lot of people were like, I don't feel good about this. So just bringing some realism to it. I appreciate that so much, Kyle. We're gonna go over to Stephanie. Stephanie, what did you notice about hope while working with your multilingual students?
When multilingual students come to our schools and they enter our doors, they all have a different story. And those stories may or may not affect their hope. And most recently, I've been thinking a lot about our Ukrainian refugees and our other newcomers that we have coming to Burton, and how this time might be really difficult for them to leave everything you know, to leave your country, leave your friends. Some people are leaving behind siblings. Some students are leaving behind even a parent. And coming to a new space and a new country and a new school system would be really scary and overwhelming. And so oftentimes, maybe during this season of their life, maybe we're being those hope lenders and showing that our students that you are welcome here. We're going to find your sense of belonging. They're in need of that hope-filled approach. And so that's what we're here for. So this is not also true for not just our multilingual students, or not for our newcomers, but also our multilingual students. The Science of Hope has helped us create pathways for our students to reach their goals and their full potential. The Science of Hope asks us to identify barriers to goals. And sometimes people might think that not being proficient in English yet might be a barrier to those goals. And in fact, here at Burton, we see that as an asset. And we want to leverage those assets to create pathways for their learning, how they're showing us what they know inside of our classrooms, and really feeling that sense of belonging. Sorry, I lost my space. I was doing so good. We have students throughout these pathways and tools, and they're setting those goals. Our students can then start believing themselves that they have the power to make tomorrow better, and they have the power to make it so. And also, we talk about in the Science of Hope, the connections that we need to make with students, not just our multilingual students, but with all students, and how those connections that are formed with peers, teachers, other adults in the building play a really intricate role in students reaching their hopes and dreams and their well-being overall. And we really are hoping that these connections are pathways for our students to connect to their goals and their learning, and to not only just be a part of our school, but to thrive in our school and fully participate in our classrooms and be successful in our learning communities.
I love that anticipation of needs and the asset-based thinking around language, and how do you make everybody feel like they belong and are a part of that school community. It's really cool. Raina, I have another question for you. As far as like creating a sense of belonging at your school, and I know that was a focus for your staff, what did you notice about students who saw an uptick in hope?
That's a great question. And so we knew that our goal was to ignite hope in our students and our staff last year. We knew the research showed that a person's hope score or level of hope was the greatest predictor of a person's well-being. And while well-being is always a great goal, following the pandemic and several years of hard things in our school, we needed hope and healthy well-being more than ever. So when we measured our students' hope scores in the fall, we weren't surprised to see that our fourth grade students had the lowest hope scores of any grade level. We knew from what we knew of our students that they had the greatest struggles emotionally, socially, academically, and just in life. And what did surprise us was that when we measured their hope scores again in the spring, it was actually our fourth grade students who had made the biggest gains in hope. And even more surprising was that when we measured and looked at our academic scores, it was the same students who'd had the greatest rise in hope who also had the greatest gains in academic learning. And so that that experience was just phenomenal to see that in our data. It's one thing to hear the research on hope and well-being, or even to believe that teaching and igniting hope is possible. But to see the results in our data was beyond exciting. And so that's in our handout. I remember the links that we shared. If you want to see some of those actual data reports and scales, those are there for you. We know that hope was ignited last year, and it launched us well into the second year of building a hope-centered school community with our theme of Our Flame Inspires Others. And as we continue the work building hope with our staff and students this year, using the grant from OSPI and the work with Dr. Hellman, and the team from Kids Up Strong, it's helping us share the vision of hope with our entire community. So we have many exciting plans that we're working on, including a school-wide hope-focused family and community involvement event next spring, where we want to open our school to our families and the community around us to come and see our work with hope and to participate in some hope building activities.
I love that extension out into the community. That's really cool too. We do have a couple of audience questions, and for folks in the audience, if you want to upvote the ones that you want to see the most. One of them that came up was, what curriculum did you use for your small groups on increasing hope? And Rena, I think, is that a question for you probably?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I didn't have a small group curriculum designed for 2nd through 5th graders on hope. So I took the research and the information that I had from the book Hope Rising and other materials like the work with Kids Up Strong and other areas, and I created it. So my co-counselor and I, we just went back through some of the same teaching we'd done at the Tier 1 level in all classrooms, and we looked at hope. We looked at their strengths. I actually had them do a hope worksheet where they talked about a goal and what obstacles might come up and how they would overcome those. And we painted, we're elementary, so we painted hope rocks, and because the groups have to be fun. And I said, I want your rock to represent hope. You can put whatever you want on it, as long as you can explain to me how that equates to hope for you. So if you need pizza on your rock, that's fine, just as long as you can explain how that's a goal. And then we went through the worksheet. And so we talked about like how some of the obstacles might be that what we imagine of art in our head versus what we paint on a rock might not turn out the same, or we might not like the color, or how will we fix that? And so we just broke it down into like micro steps and micro skills. And then we worked on the rocks, and then we compared. And then I had them think about we did some art around like their current world and all the things in it, what their hopes for the future were. And we did some future oriented exercises. And then like I said, we looked at their strengths. So I literally just created it from what I knew builds hope. And it was that small group where they're sharing with each other and building the excitement between each other. And it was really phenomenal. And I think the results from the small group are also in the data reports that we shared, but those are worth taking a look at.
Awesome. That sounds so fun. I wish I could be in your small group. I would totally paint rocks. I think we all need those positive touchstones in our lives, and that's so fun. We have another question. I think this one might be for Becky. Have you measured staff hope? And if so, did you notice how staff hope changed?
That's a great question. So this year we are, in fact, today's the day that our staff is going to be taking the pre kind of survey so that we can look at where they're at in the different areas of hope. So that will help us target some of our work with our staff this year.
Yeah, I know the hope assessment, I think, is like maybe 8 or 10 questions maybe, and it's really quick to take, and you can take it online. And I mean, if you make a survey Gizmo out of it, it's really simple. for people just to take like a dipstick and see like where are we at this week and or this month and look. We had another question. Did your district superintendent buy into this initially? And how are they feeling about it now? And I lost my question. Where did it go? But yeah, why don't we start with that?
So as part of the Hope Navigators grant, they did ask that you have somebody from the district office on your team. And so our assistant superintendent, like elementary ed director, Scott Monroe, is on our team. And he went through all the training with us and is a huge believer in the work of Hope as well. And so our actual district superintendent has changed from the time that we applied for the grant till now. But we have a lot of district support in our SEL department and with Mr. Monroe also supporting the work.
Do you know, are other elementary schools in your district starting to work on it? Has it been a contagious kind of thing, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, you know, several schools have reached out to us and asked us about it and are reading the book and doing some of the work as well. And we have a district team that might try to get into this next Hope Navigators group that they were hoping to do. Yeah, it is spreading some across the district as well.
Yeah, I would say that I know Becky was able to talk to principals last year about it, and I know Kyle talked to coaches as well, and I've had conversations with counselors. So in addition to just having Scott Monroe on the team and other SEL members, just those pockets of conversations. I've had counselors reaching out this year and asking, you know, how did you ask the kids the questions and how did you do the scaling? And so I know that it is spreading. My daughter actually goes to school in a nearby district, and it's also happening in her school. She's actually in a middle school, and she said, "Mom, you won't believe what I had to learn in school today." She goes, "They're teaching me the science of hope." And she was laughing because she's heard me talk about it so much and be so passionate about it. She was already well aware. And she's like, "They're like a year behind you, Mom." And so it's pretty funny. So nearby districts are also involved in it as well.
Oh, that's awesome. It's cool to see good ideas catch on like that. I'm going to assume you paid for your retreat with your grant funds. Is that right? Yeah, that's so. We are gonna wrap up here. We're running out of time, so I'm gonna share my screen. We are hoping that you consider spreading these ideas in your own district, to think about talking about them with your leadership team or your PLC, or maybe even having a conversation with students to continue. We have a couple of resources to share with you. We do have a funding document if you want to look about at possible ways to fund. We have our newsletter that we wanted to share with you. The book that was mentioned earlier was Hope Rising, and it's a great read. Highly recommend that. The Kitsap Strong Toolkit is also a really cool resource with lots of useful links and tools in there. We want to recommend to you the High School and Beyond Plan page, as well as the Burton Elementary School page. Burton has put together a resource kind of folder for us. So they have all of their Hope artifacts. So if you're curious about the tools that they've used, they are in that folder. Very useful stuff. And if you have questions, you can always connect with our OSPI staff. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter each month. We use the same themes from our webinars for content for our newsletters. So you get articles from ed leaders, you get resource links, and it's just focused on providing support for leadership teams. So if that sounds like you, you should subscribe. Next month, we are going to be looking at a systemic approach to supporting anti-racist school climate practices. If you enjoy our webinars, it should be really cool to share with friends. We'll have on with us Tanya May from our special education department, as well as Sarah Albertson from our Office of Civil Rights to talk about this. We do have an evaluation, and it totally helps us if you are willing to take the evaluation. And I'm going to launch that right now so that you can do that. If you'd like to take the longer feedback survey, it does help us if you want to suggest presenters or schools that you know who are doing cool work. We're always interested in learning more from our audience as well. And we'd love to see you get clock hours for joining us. So if you join live, you've already registered for the year through Zoom. You'll also need to register for clock hours monthly in PD Enroller. PD Enroller will send an evaluation to your email. We'll verify your attendance, and then we release your clock hours. If you're watching this video later, the process changes. You register each month for those clock hours in PD Enroller, and then complete the evaluation. And you'll also do our graduation equity feedback survey, just to signal to us that you watched them. And then we'll verify your attendance, usually every 2 weeks or so, and release your hours in that way. And if you have questions about this, you can always email Ronnie Larson, who does our clock hour support. Thanks so much for checking out our webinars, and we will see you next month.